Priya was just revealed as Brawlhalla's newest legend, wielding the brand new weapon, Chakram. Today we're doing a full breakdown, exploring all of her unique signatures and mechanics. And if you're wondering about the Chakram kit itself, as things have changed since we saw the last test build version, that'll be another video coming up very shortly. First up, we've got this Chakram NSig, and already this is going to be a lengthy section because there is so much going on with this move. If you didn't catch on already, this is a vertical anti-air move that also reverses. This does not have active input, so it is always going to send in the opposite direction that you're facing. And you can see when you're sending that Chakram up, it is about a 60 or so degree angle, but that actually can change. If you notice using this on the wall, it is now nearly a 90 degree angle upward, and we're going to do a side-by-side right here just so you can see this difference. And of course this is going to be amazing for recovering. You can see just how far Priya is going up on that wall, and if you look closely on the right side of the screen as well, she's instantly getting that wall touch. So this is really fantastic right there. That's going to be the wall touch. So a fantastic move for recovering. Not only that, a fantastic anti-edge guard tool. That's like 4 fantastics in a span of 10 seconds, but you can kind of see why. Someone's camping you on the ledge with cannon, camping you on the ledge with blasters, with sword, you can just reverse like that. However, you can't just use it carelessly because of course it can be countered from directly above. Now here I'm going to be showing a couple live gameplay examples so you can get a sense of how this actually feels, how it flows, what situations you can use it in, and this is going to be the case for all of these signatures I will do this for. You can see right here, complete area zone denial in the air, and then just finding the angle, sniping with that huge hitbox, that huge diagonal, once again about a 60 degree angle or so, and just destroying that stock. Next up is an example of how this reversal might actually hurt you in some situations, like right there. It's kind of like Baraza's NSig, because if you're sending forward and you're launching forward, oftentimes you want to hit your opponent forward, but in this case, it's backwards, so you got to be careful about that. However, if you end up whiffing, you can see this jump right here. Fantastic, very little recovery frames, very difficult to punish if your opponent's out of position, and then you can get away scot-free. Next up, we've got the Chakram SSig. While this does appear to be much more simple than the NSig, there still is a little bit under the hood going on here. But while this footage is playing in slow-mo and you can see the detailed animations here with the multiple twirls all having a hitbox, I do want to mention a mechanic about these Chakram signatures, which is that they do not swap your mode. If you don't know, the Chakram itself has 2 different modes, one of them hard hitting, you can see that right there, and then one of them is more for strings. This signature and all of her signatures keep the mode that you originally had when you used it. So the only way to mode swap, as we know, is to either use downlight or to throw your weapon. With that out of the way, let's get into some of these mechanics on the side zig. What I was showing in this clip is the momentum after going off stage. You can see you still retain a good portion of it. Priya is going to continue launching to the side ever so slightly, which means that you're not left feeling stuck after using a signature like this. That is, unless you use it directly into the wall, because that can be punished. You can see your head is peeking up there. Now the hitbox is also peeking up there. So if your opponent is not very far away, like the sword user, that can actually punish and that can actually counterattack, similar to the NSig. Of course, you're putting yourself at a much greater risk by doing that. Something like a downlight into a down air might KO, but this is an option to use because you have so much momentum. You don't need to dash to get this full distance. You can see you are launching yourself either way, and this distance away from the wall, still able to make it and safely get the wall touch. So that is pretty good. Not a lot of signatures in Brawlhalla have that type of burst distance just from a single use. And once again, here are a couple live gameplay examples. Here we see it punishing a grounded attack. This is specifically a dare that lands on the ground, so very good for punishing landings. And then here is this GC side sig clip once again, but just with a little bit more context, you can see what led up to it. You are stopping your momentum on a dime. Your opponent expects you to continue moving forward, but instead you're just charging up that attack. Closing out the Chakram kit, we've got a move that is certainly going to see a lot of use. This is the down sig, and if you couldn't tell, it may or may not have a hitbox behind it as well. We'll get into that, of course. You can see it is pretty quick, pretty strong. She leaps into the air, so you might be able to dodge certain attacks while using this move. Think about a sword downlight that whiffs. That happens all the time with different attacks that jump up. We don't have the exact data to know that, but either way, even if it doesn't, it's going to be amazing. You can see you're spinning this chakram around you a couple times, and that actually has an active hitbox all throughout. This is an example of it being a fantastic anti-approach tool because it's connecting before the other Priya even touches the ground. So think about, they mentioned this on the dev stream, it's kind of like Jala sword downsig, but hitting higher. I would say maybe not, because it's also hitting behind on the backswing. It's almost more like a stationary low-key Qatar side sig, in the way that this hitbox sort of just acts as a vortex around you. This move, this is very good. This is very, very good. And this live gameplay example is showing how it can be used as an effective punish tool because it's going to hit on the ground and because of that angle, a good distance in the air vertically as well. Moving on to the sword now, we've got the NSig, and this is actually my pick for the sleeper best sig inner kit. And that might be surprising because a bunch of these have seemed actually quite good, particularly that orb NSig and maybe the orb downsig as well. But this is a big leap with a massive hitbox on the second hit. And this comes out every single time guaranteed. So it's not like you need to connect the first one to get the second one. It's not like Sidra's NSig. This is both. And I'm going to slow this way down just so we can see how ridiculous this range truly is. Because when we see it at full speed, it might be hard to tell. That crescent moon, that is insane. This connected. The Priya barely launched up from the ground. So not only is it huge horizontally, it is huge below and above. And this is an example of a potential string of downlight into GC NSig. I don't think this is that real. It seems like you can escape that pretty easily, maybe with a fast fall or something like that. However, this clip does illustrate that the hitbox craziness starts with the first hit. It's not only the huge slash afterwards, but it can pick up pretty well on the initial jump. As we swap into a gameplay example here, I feel like I really only need to show one because that hitbox, it's pretty clear how good it is. Here, I want to show how good it is defensively because you can just jump away. It's kind of like the orb NSig. I would venture to say maybe the orb one is a little bit better in that case because the jump is so quick, but regardless, this is not going to be an easy move to punish at all. And since we got a little bit of a sneak peek about what this next sig is going to be, why not jump into it right away? This is the sword side sig, and functionally it's actually quite similar to the Chakram one, although it has a little bit going on here as well. So you can see this second hit after this sliding attack comes out every single time, regardless of whether you miss the attack or whether you hit the attack. It's not like Ezio sword side sig, for example, which is a grab into a release. This is going to have the full travel time and the full hit every single time. And that's really good for a situation like this where you actually want that extra extension. It also has a little bit of a crescent moon hitbox, which is always useful because then it catches people on the ground and in the air. It's not the easiest move to punish because you actually travel very quickly from that initial jump. But like I was saying about how it's similar to the Chakram version, that is in its momentum. So it has a lot of travel speed and a lot of travel time, but it doesn't need a dash to get there. And we could also see in the previous clip that it kind of freezes you in place during that startup. Now, I don't know if the devs here charged it to get that effect, but you can see it has a good amount of distance regardless of any previous starting momentum. So that's what I was saying in the very beginning, when Priya has some little tricks, regardless of her initial speed, she can actually jump you, and you might be very shocked. You might be very surprised at where it can lead to. This is just a funny clip of them both using the side stick at the same time, and you can see there is a dead zone in the center or in the very start, so you can't really hit it extremely stacked from the looks of it, although of course that's something we'll only know once we actually get our hands on this kit. The final signature to talk about before we get into our stances, before we discuss the optimal loadout to use, is this sword down stick, and it actually reaches so high up that the camera setting the devs were using on this stream, it couldn't see it. So I'm gonna take a couple of these clips where the camera is more zoomed out so we can just see the range on this down sig is absurd. And this DSig has a lot going on for it, so there's going to be clips about momentum, there's going to be clips about range, but here, once again, just so we can get a sense of it. Now that we know how high this hits up, what actually happens when you connect it? Well, it's a spike, and it's always going to be a spike. So even though this enemy Priya is very deep in the red, this has no chance of knocking out at all because you're knocking on the ground. Of course, that reduces the amount of force that someone takes. But if you're off stage, then it's a completely different story. This range paired with this vertical power is crazy. Look at how this connects. It's not only at the very edge, it's all the way up. That hitbox travels upward, then Priya jumps up and launches you downward. Very, very scary signature. It's kind of like Nyx Blaster's NSig, and we know how good that move is, except it's not the most broken thing in the world that we've ever seen, because you actually have to be very close to the ledge in order to connect that move. We can see right there in that first clip, not sending off stage, and then here at the very lip of that stage, finally sending downward. So you do have to be very careful with your positioning, otherwise this move is kind of a throw. You're just tossing your opponent into the air, no chance of KOing them. And you also have to be careful because the moment you use it, your momentum completely halts. So visually, the way that it's charging, the way that it sends upward, it kind of looks like Dusk's Spear NSig. However, unlike that move, you're completely frozen. So take a look at this Priya using the NSig right here and completely getting stopped in place despite having the read on the enemy and knowing that they're going to be high in the air, knowing that they're going to be at the perfect height to hit it. It's still whiffing because of that momentum. I'm not a huge fan of moves that do this. I would prefer it has less force or it's less fast or something like that so it can feel fluid, but this seems like one of the ways they're trying to balance it. Let's now move into the final one of these live gameplay example showcases, and this one is a treat. I've got a number here that are very interesting to take a look at, and this right here is one of them. Look at this dodge read into the knockout. This was in the orange, and it actually only works because of the most recent sword sidelight change where it's now a setup tool, and it's not going to be as good as something like a Suri sword NSig, again because of that momentum. I'm kind of harping on that point, but either way, catching a dodge up there is pretty solid. Now we saw this once before. I just want to take a look in a closer lens of this reversal situation, because this is a spot where you could do a number of things. You could GC NSig here, potentially make it back, although you might have been interrupted by the enemy Priya. So instead going for a GC DSig, completely countering that GC downlight that also would have taken the stock, is another option in your toolkit. You just have so many different things that you could do. It's kind of great. Also kind of terrifying. Finally, let's take a look at these stances. So strength is taking away from speed, defense is taking away from strength, dexterity is taking away from defense. We don't actually know how dex works with Chakram yet, so this might be an option, although it doesn't seem the best. And finally, speed is taking away from dex. Just from looking at this, it seems like either the strength stance or the speed stance is the best, but we won't know for sure until we get a list of the numbers on how dexterity and Chakram interact. She launches in 1 week, February 5th.